All right, to get everybody ready for the Yahoo Fantasy Football season,
Yes.
we here are going to discuss the top players at each position. We're going to get started here with quarterbacks. We're going to talk a little bit about each of the quarterbacks at the top of the standings there and give our thoughts on what we think they're going to do in the 2010 season.
And the first quarterback on the going from the Yahoo Fantasy pre-draft rankings here, looking by position, the quarterback on top of the list at the moment is Aaron Rodgers.
Without being a homer, being a Packers fan, I do think Aaron Rodgers is going to have a pretty big season. He's got a lot of weapons at wide receiver. They've got a good running game, so they don't have to rely on Aaron Rodgers, and that usually helps out a quarterback when he's able to be free swinging and not have to carry the team from behind a lot.
I think it's interesting that Aaron Rodgers had such a great fantasy season last year, even though, he still hasn't made it to anywhere near the Super Bowl.
They did well. They got to the playoffs.
But Rodgers, Green Bay is going to be great this year. So I think that this is their year, in my opinion.
I don't think
as much as I wish I would be able to say it was the Bears' year.
I don't think Rodgers is going to be going after records like Drew Brees did a couple of years ago, or Peyton Manning seems to do on an annual basis. But I do think Rodgers is going to have probably the top consistent fantasy season quarterback. So he's probably an excellent choice for the top quarterback.
Certainly, yeah. If you need to spend your top pick on a quarterback, spend it on Aaron Rodgers. Drew Brees, he was your guy last year, as I recall.
Brees, from experience, Brees can be excellent and he can be infuriating because there are some games where that team just did not play up to par until the fourth quarter. Or the fact that he has so many targets makes him an excellent selection. There's so many people that he can throw the ball to, hand the ball off to. He contributes in a lot of ways on the offensive side. But at the same time, that Saints offense sputters from time to time and could cost you one or two matchups throughout the season.
Yeah. Peyton Manning probably won't, however.
Peyton Manning is Mr. Consistency. I had him 2 seasons ago and won the championship with him. I think he's as valuable as running backs.
You can't go wrong with Peyton Manning.
A lot of people will argue with me on that, but I really do think that he is as valuable as some of the top running backs because he always plays well. Even there are some games where the Colts maybe don't play up to par, but Manning's still good in those games. I really think Manning, you could make a case for being the number 1 quarterback.
You could certainly. I don't think anybody would begrudge somebody picking Manning really, really, really high. What do we? Tony Romo.
Tony Romo, I think, might be a little overrated, but at the same time, the Cowboys had some really big offensive outbursts last season.
At the end of the season.
I think they are going to be a cohesive unit on the offensive side. They've got an excellent wide receiver core if they can settle their differences between who's going to be the starting wide receivers.
I think
where
we can
Des
probably
Bryant's
count out.
That.
Well, I think Des Bryant's going to go in the lineup right away because Roy Williams is not producing the way they want him to
Jerry Jones
produce.
already came out and said Williams is the number 1. And, of course, Jones does not coach the team, so that's been an issue with the wide receivers.
Yeah.
Because Patrick Creighton has requested a trade. But not getting into the politics of it, if they can just get it all together, get it on the field, and I think they will. They've got an excellent wide receiver core. They've got decent running backs as well. I think Romo could have a breakout season, but we've been saying this for a while, too, and I could see Romo also being a disappointment.
Yeah, Romo at this point can go either way. I think he is poised for either a really phenomenal breakout season or a really disappointing crash.
Well, they've set the bar so high that he's got to do one or the other.
Yeah. Matt Schaub on a Houston team that has struggled.
Well, they had their first winning season last year.
Yeah.
So I think anytime you've got Andre Johnson to throw to, you're going to be a threat at quarterback. You could put pretty much any quarterback there. If Johnson's there snagging those balls down, you're going to have a decent fantasy quarterback. The problem I see with Houston having is Schaub, he does have the health problems. He does struggle to stay healthy. I don't think it's fair to necessarily tag a guy as being dangerous to pick because he constantly gets injured, but because Schaub is not somebody who's always hurt. He just seems to have some bad luck in the injury column. But I do think Houston is going to try to use the run a little bit more.
And I'm not sold on him. I'm just not sold. Everybody's talking about how he's a phenomenal option, but I'm not quite sold on Schaub yet.
I don't know if I would rely on him week in and week out in my fantasy lineup. He would be kind of a risky play, I think, to play for the entire season without having somebody really good as the backup.
That having been said, down here below Schaub and Romo, we have Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady.
Now, I think Phillip Rivers is an excellent fantasy choice. He puts up a ton of numbers a lot. The Chargers can score a lot on offense. They do seem to want to possibly focus on the run by taking who they picked in the first round and having Darren Sproles obviously as the second option at running back. But with North Turner, he loves to just flip that over on its side and just pass the ball like crazy too. So I think that benefits Rivers owners. The problem I think they're going to have is that I think the Chargers are going to struggle a little bit more than they did last season, and Rivers' numbers won't match what he did last year, I don't think.
Probably not as good, but I don't think you can't really make a case that any other team in their division is going to eclipse them at this point, I don't think.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
So I think he's still solid. Brady, of course, is always solid as long as he stays healthy.
Well, and if he shows up for camp.
Yeah, well, if he shows up for training camp.
Brady's got major weapons in Moss and Welker, and they did some things in the draft that I think are going to benefit their offensive side as well. So, Brady's always a good choice, but there are some times where Brady really isn't a factor in their plan for winning that game. So you do have to worry about the one or two games where Brady is pretty much a statistical no-show.
Right, but since they don't have much of a running game, they rely a lot more on the passing attack.
Yeah, so I would actually probably take a Brady over Schaub.
Yeah, certainly Brady over
and
Schaub.
I would probably take Brady over Romo if you want to stretch a little bit.
Yeah.
As somebody who's probably more dependable.
Next name on this list I actually can't say because it's a swear word, so I'm going to ask Eric to...
I believe it says Brett Favre.
Language.
Let's just break this down here. Favre may or may not play, so I don't know if you'd be willing to take Favre as one of the top quarterbacks, possibly in the first 3 rounds of the draft.
At this point in the offseason, last year he had already signed with the Vikings at this point.
Did he?
Uh-huh. And the year before he had already signed with the Jets. I believe he's...
Well, he had surgery, and nobody just randomly gets surgery unless they intend to feel better afterwards. And if you feel better, you play football. So
yeah, there's all the drama about throwing to high schoolers in the park. And
I don't want to... What's he doing around kids? I don't want to...
What do you think he's doing around kids?
Warping their minds. So I think he's coming back. I think he's a safe pick, but I personally would not pick him.
I will not be choosing him.
Despite the fact that the Vikings have a lot of offensive weapons.
However, I very well may choose Jay Cutler like I did last year.
Hat aside, I do think Cutler is a decent pick this year. He's going to have his second shot at this offensive system. They've got amazing talent at the wide receiver position that has, had the opportunity to be in the system as well.
And they brought in Mike Martz.
They brought in Mike Martz, who's an offensive guru.
Yeah.
He probably gets a little more credit than he should. But I think Cutler is going to fit well in that system. And if the Bears are able to play ahead of some teams, I think they're still going to pass. So I think Cutler is probably a good bet, if not a risky bet. This could be a guy that makes or breaks your fantasy season.
Again, I think he's, if he's picked and he's lucky enough to have a breakout season, he'll be a sleeper. If not, he'll be a disappointment, kind of like Romo.
Yeah. I would say get a really good backup. Get a really good backup if you get Cutler.
Finally, you have 30 seconds to tell me a little bit about Kevin Kolb, sir.
Kevin Cobb. Okay.
Cobb.
Kevin Cobb. I think the Eagles are going to be good. I don't know if they're going to be playoff good, and I think Cobb is going to be the decisive factor in that. I really don't think he's going to be the same quarterback McNabb was throwing to Deshaun Jackson for deep bombs over and over. So I would probably shy away from Cobb as my top guy unless you have an excellent backup at the quarterback position.
He would be a decent backup, though. Cobb.
Yeah, I really do, but I don't know if I'd pick him that high in the draft.
Right on. We'll be back with next 10.